It's Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe, and we are back after a summer break. We're back from the beach and ready to talk Syracuse sports with you, my friends. And today, with Syracuse basketball in one of its most prolonged funks, right? Losing seasons, 4-year NCAA tournament drought. One big question that really became a groundswell on social media was whatever happened to Adam Weitsman, who would bring the celebrity guests courtside to the JMA Wireless Dome. Tom Brady, Jimmy Fallon, Julian Edelman, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Allen Iverson, Giannis Antetokounmpo. The list goes on and on. Weitsman, who was not a Syracuse alum, but wanted to help the program in any way he could and seemed to be at the forefront of something when NIL came into play and the floodgates really opened on that about 4 years ago. Well, that relationship came to an end 2 years ago. And ever since, Syracuse fans have been wondering why. Syracuse fans have been wondering, why can't he come back, considering we're in an NIL era and Syracuse should be able to take as many dollars as they can from as many sources as they can, particularly from a billionaire who wants to help the program. But one thing we were never quite sure about was just how much money Adam Weitsman was really spending with Syracuse University. Until now. Chris Carlson and Mike Waters wrote a terrific piece, which I would highly encourage you to read the entire thing on syracuse.com. The link is in the comments and in the show notes as well, so you can check out the story if it had the opportunity to do so far. I would highly encourage you to do that. Chris and Mike are going to join me shortly here, and we're going to break down this story and what it means for Syracuse. So I think it's going to answer some questions for people. It's certainly going to put forth a conversation about what it's really worth. We don't know what the value of having Tom Brady courtside at Syracuse was, but we do know what Adam was actually paying out. Now, Adam's methods were untraditional, right? This was not a guy that would show up at the traditional ribbon cutting and present a check to Syracuse University. He liked to do these things for image because it helped him as well as helping the university and his proclaimed best friend, then Syracuse basketball head coach Jim Boeheim and beyond, right? So with more details presented here, what does this really mean? Why did the relationship break down? And is it still salvageable despite a pretty harsh statement put out by Syracuse, certainly factual, but as strong as they have put out, particularly about a booster here. And it goes like this. Mr. Weitsman, said Vice President for Communications Sarah Scalise in a rare public comment about a booster, quote, is not a major donor at Syracuse University. So is this discussion, is our story and what will result from it put to bed the Adam Weitsman conversation, or just open it up even further? I want to talk to Mike Waters about that. I want to talk to Chris Carlson about that, the gentleman that put in a lot of work on this story. And I want you to make your judgments. And I would love to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders on this. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider gives you direct text message access to me. Anytime you guys get breaking news first, exclusive inside analysis, opinion, just want to shoot the breeze, talk SU sports, you know you can do it with me anytime. Syracuse football training camp is coming back this week. Football, it's here. Summer's over. We'll have updates from training camp provided first to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, and so much more. We'd love for you to sign up today. It's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. You can try it free for 2 weeks before that. So before we get to Chris and Mike, a reminder that we love to feature your original music here on Syracuse Sports. And I was inspired to go back to a friend of mine, a local musician here in Syracuse, New York, because I just watched the Billy Joel documentary on HBO, which I could not recommend enough. Even if you're not a big fan of Billy Joel, even if you're not a fan of Billy Joel, what an amazing documentary that was. And I really enjoyed it. And I was just inspired to go back to a man and his piano. And that's what Just Joe is. So I want to listen to Joe and his cover of the song Kryptonite. We'll play a portion of that here, and then we'll play the song in its entirety at the end of the podcast. And we can do that for you. If you'd like your original music featured here on Syracuse Sports, get in touch. All the info is in the show notes on how you can do that. So first, a little bit from Joe, and then Chris and Mike on Adam Weitsman.
Call me strong, you call me weak, but your secrets I will keep. You took for granted all times I never let you down. You stumbled in and bumped your head. If not for me, then you'd be dead. I picked you up, put you back on solid ground. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman?
So, gentlemen, this is a subject that has been certainly lingering around Syracuse basketball for the past few years, even with Weitsman departing his support and not being courtside at the Dome for the past couple of years. But why now? Why are we hearing some details on this story we had not heard all along now? Chris, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think it's just Syracuse sort of finally recognized that whenever they have a bad basketball season, like, this is where everybody's mind is immediately going to go, right? Like, is it because Adam isn't spending? Is it because they kicked him out? Is it something they did? Do they have the answer, but they refuse to, embrace it? So I think just on the heels of last year being such a terrible season, and then seeing, all the conversation from Atan Thomas, from Eric Devendorf, from Aiden McGuire that sort of came from that, the university finally said, hey, like, we need to put some facts out here in terms of how much was being spent.
Mike, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty fair, pretty accurate. The Adam Weitsman breakup with Syracuse story probably fades away if Syracuse is winning games and making NCAA tournaments for the last 2 or 3 years, but they haven't been. Haven't made an NCAA tournament in 4 years. So, when the most prominent NIL contributor walks away from the program and the next 3 years are a struggle, I think it's natural that he's going to remain a topic of conversation among fans and, message boards, radio shows, all that stuff, podcasts. And, they didn't do anything to make it go away at the time. And I think now at this point, some, folks at Syracuse University finally felt it necessary to kind of put Adam's giving in some sort of context.
Yeah, Chris, you've dealt with these kind of things a lot, as you have, Mike, but the statement that Sarah Scalise put out, who's a spokesman for Syracuse University, and I'm going to put it back on the screen. I highlighted it earlier in the intro. Mr. Weitsman, said Scalise in a rare public comment about a booster, quote, is not a major donor at Syracuse University. So this is Syracuse really taking a step forward here, and I'll call it a bold step by their standards. They usually just let these things go, but felt it necessary to really emphasize that he was not what people thought he was. And one thing in one sense, and I want to fill in the details on that, because something that you and Mike flushed out, which was really important and something we did not know until now in this story, were some actual numbers here. So let me throw that out there for the audience that has not seen, and you should check out the entire story, of course, on syracuse.com. Weitsman showed syracuse.com a philanthropy report that indicated $1.1 million in payments to the school over 6 years, most of which was required if he wanted to buy premium seating. And he had the premium seating courtside, the Spike Lee seats, if you will, right behind Jim Boeheim, who was the coach at the time. At the time of the breakup between Syracuse and Weitsman, which was 2 years ago in 2023, he had reported contracts worth less than $160,000 with Syracuse athletes. Now, Syracuse has records of deals that Weitsman made with 8 of its athletes worth $123,000. Weitsman said he's got deals with 9 Syracuse players worth $153,000. And there's one payment that makes that up, which we'll get to here shortly. But a couple other details that were out there. Weitsman gave a $1,000 gift to the school's dance team in 2022. He donated the use of a private jet to Syracuse basketball coaches for recruiting that had an estimated value of $58,400. Now, here's the most surprising thing of all. Weitsman, who was associated as a Syracuse men's basketball booster, the 2 biggest payments that he put out there were to a football player, Elijah Clark, and a women's basketball player, Indiasia Fair. He also made payments of $24,000. That was $30,000 to Clark, by the way, $24,000 to Fair. He also made $24,000 payments to Joe Girard, Judah Mintz, spread out some money to other basketball players, Peter Carey, John Bolajak. got 5,000 each. And in Weitsman's words, quote, "It was spread across the team. It wasn't a lot." So, Mike, I want to turn to you on this. As I said, Weitsman was most associated with the men's basketball team. And as we discovered from documents that we could verify numbers, he wasn't paying the basketball players as much as you would think. And the two biggest payments went out to other sports. I was really surprised to see that.
I was surprised too when we got those numbers. When actually, I think Chris was the one that was doing the reporting on that, and a little bit of a surprise. You thought maybe the contributions would be more. Certainly, he talked about giving more, planned to give more, and we have no idea if that would have come to fruition or not. But that's a big part of what this story was aiming to do, was put everything in perspective and try to shed as much light as possible on the whole NIL contributions, other contributions. You go back to what that quote you put up about how that Mr. Weitsman isn't a major donor. There's the crux of this issue between Adam and some of the folks at SU and others is basically just verbiage. It's a definition of what's a donor. And okay, if a donor means total donations like charitable giving, Adam, that was not Adam. Adam got stuff in return, whether it was tickets to the games, his seats, the prominent ones, his suite. Actually, his suite was actually 2 suites that he turned into one. So you could say, okay, maybe if he's not a major donor, but Adam would argue he's a major customer. And customers are valuable too. There's value there. I mean, if he goes away, who buys those seats? Who fills those suites? It's money that Syracuse is going to have to find elsewhere. So it was really interesting to see people split hairs over this. And I think it's a large part of the mystery over this for the last 2 or 3 years, is that we finally got people actually on the record to say exactly what they think is.
Chris, I want to get your thoughts on that, because in an era where you have to search out every rock you can find to get big dollars donated to the university, you would think that Adam Weitsman would be kept, in line to do that, even if he did things unconventionally. But this relationship broke down. In your conversations with him and in university officials and reporting out this story, why did this relationship break down?
That is like sort of a mystery that Mike and I could not get to the center of completely. That there's some logical threads to follow. When Adam was paying athletes, he was doing it very publicly at a time where the university would tell us pretty much nothing about paying players or what their plans are. The NCAA rules were super murky. Nobody knew what they were. Adam was certainly pushing boundaries in terms of what was going to be acceptable nationally. I think he was pretty clearly doing things that the NCAA wanted to stop. Whether it could or not is another question, and whether Syracuse should have been pushing the boundaries more is another question. But I think that is probably that's started to sour the relationship, and then it's unclear why it can't be fixed, why it continued to deteriorate. And you can see both sides, which to me is the most interesting part of this story, right? The university perspective is why are you doing these things publicly when you know that it could get us in trouble? And the Adam perspective is, I'm going to national experts. They tell me you're not going to get in trouble. And I went to prison in the 90s, and I'm not going to do anything under the table. I'm going to do everything out in the open. And if it's wrong, come stop me. And both of these perspectives make sense, except in maybe the NCAA world where the school is responsible for stopping Adam itself, right? Versus the sheriff coming to town and saying hey, no, don't do that anymore.
As we look at this, guys, and we see, Chris, you just hit on a good point there. Adam wants to do it his way. Syracuse wanted to do it their way. They did, for lack of a better term, tolerate this for a few years, right? Until it did come to a head. And you had a couple specific examples in the story. Adam didn't like how he was treated when Jalen Hurts was in town, and it was apparently put in a room He wanted it was like a waiting area, I guess, in the dome, or a room they put people. He wasn't put in the area he wanted to be in. He didn't like the way he was treated when DeMar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills was around. What am I missing? A couple other things, right? He wanted a Make-A-Wish Foundation thing put on the scoreboard, and they wouldn't do that. Right now, these are things Adam claims. A couple of these things Syracuse said they could not corroborate these stories, right? But those feel like details at the end of the road. It felt like there was much more to it. Those were just kind of the last straw situations, right?
Yeah, I don't know how Chris feels about it, but just on the surface, those would seem to be very minor things that could be worked through if everybody was seeing eye to eye. It seemed like there had to be other stuff going on here for those slights, in air quotes, to be the things that would cause Adam decide that he's going to leave. Like maybe that was the straw that broke a camel's back, but yeah, it just seems like there should have been more there early on, prior to that. I don't know. Chris, we've talked a lot while doing this story together. I don't know what your feelings are, though.
Yeah, the one real slight, right, was that the university was not going to sell him his seats, his sort of prized seats next to the SU bench
going forward
next year. Like, that is a real slight. The other things are sort of petty grievances, I think. But Adam was known as the guy next to the bench who, those were his seats, and Syracuse was going to take them out of circulation. Like, that is, a targeted strike. Now, when you go back to the NCAA question, like, there are reasons why you might not want him sitting next to your coach. Like, if the NCAA is going to come in and say rules are broken, you might not want that individual sitting directly next to the bench in photos with the coach who has been found to have violated or been part of a program that's violated, rules twice before. That might not be an image that you want as the university. But you can also see why that would be either perceived as a slight or, something that Adam just couldn't work with, right? Like those were his seats. Like, this community this community knew him as the guy that sat there. That was his place in his mind.
See, I think timing is important here. People have to remember this was 2 years ago, which is an eternity when it comes to the changing landscape in college sports with NIL and the transfer portal. Syracuse was still behind its peers. Collectives did not exist. You had situations where you're saying it was Syracuse afraid of the NCAA at a time it really shouldn't be. There was no rules. This thing just came into play in 2021, shortly after a Supreme Court ruling, which was on a different subject, but did certainly highlight what NIL could be. And Syracuse, it felt like, and you mentioned it, Chris, they had been investigated twice, the basketball program. They had some scars from that and just were not messing with that. John Wildhack, you reiterated the comment in your story, said, we're not going to pay for play. Well, guess what? They do that now. A lot of these things they were afraid of 2 years ago, they're now doing because that's the game we're playing now. Syracuse just didn't want to lead the way on that, but it felt like Adam kind of wanted to in a way. And that's where the egos and everything kind of clashed here. But I think that's important to reiterate. 2 years ago, we're still in the Wild West, don't get me wrong, but we were in uncharted waters with absolutely no map on how to do any of this.
Yeah, and I think it was in the story, or Chris, we've used this phrase to describe Syracuse before. They're a risk-averse institution.
Mm-hmm.
And I partly understand that, not just from, the probations in 1993 and then again in 2015, but also just that's kind of institutional thinking. And I understand that. And it's hard to go to a big institution and say, you're being silly. There are no rules. Don't worry about it. Well, again, like you pointed out before, if the NCAA does find something to be wrong here, Adam's not going to get in trouble. It's going to be the university. It's going to be their reputation. It'll be Jim Boeheim's reputation, and on and on. So it's hard to blame somebody for being risk averse. It's almost like, casting blame on somebody for just being afraid of heights. They can't help it.
Yeah, there's a lot to lose.
I'm deathly scared of heights, and it should be noted it's one of the fears that humans are actually inherit when they're born. The other being loud noises. Everything else is a learned fear. Just wanted to point that out. Okay.
Hey, the more you know from Brent Axe.
No, but you're right. It is a risk adverse administration, and I'm just amazed now, Chris. Though when we talk about the era we're in now, and this is an unanswerable question in a way, but I'm going to put it out there. If they had managed to keep Adam around or vice versa, however you want to frame it, Adam's still a part of this thing. He had put out there publicly, you wrote about this, some $1 million pledges for commitments coming into Syracuse. You look at the game being played now, that money that's being raised, the Lallies that have raised money, Vinny Lobdell, Mike, you were at this event, recently held an event in Skinny Atlas that raised money for the basketball program in kind of a unique fashion and in a fun way with some celebrity guests, speaking of which, and donations and a 3-point contest and slam dunk. And that's normal now to do these fun. They're not risk adverse anymore. They're leaning into these things. But if Adam was allowed to stay around, maybe he told you this, I don't know, but what would he be looking at in terms of Adam Weitsman as a donor at Syracuse? Do you think he would have followed through on those $1 million pledges? Or I don't know. I'm speculating here, but had he been around, how do you think this would be a different conversation than it is?
That is a great unknown, right? Because he was very public that he wanted to pay SU athletes $1 million. At the point that he left, he was paying SU athletes $163,000. There's a big difference between $1 million and $163,000 that I think some folks at Syracuse were probably pretty skeptical of whether that gap would be bridged. That said, Adam is, he paid 6 figures for Boeheim's Army. He's helping Lemoyne. He's helping Siena. It's sort of impossible to know, what Adam's contributions would look like today if he was allowed to stick around. It's really like one of the impossible things to just understand. Like,
well, let me
can't know that. We can't know that.
We can't, but let me turn to Mike on this and let me backtrack for a sec. He is giving money to Lemoyne, $250,000 over the next 2 years. That's more than he gave the Syracuse basketball program. He also helped Jerry McNamara retain a coveted freshman at Siena. So he's still spending money out there. He's still doing this, not in the splashy celebrity courtside way. It's hard to do that at Siena and Lemoyne, frankly, because they're just not on ESPN or ESPN2 or have the profile that Syracuse does. But Mike, do they still need Adam Weitsman? You were at that event I mentioned, Vinny Lobdell, who, for people that don't know, his son Noah is on the team. He's a successful businessman here in Syracuse, has a lot of money, and is a donor to the program. They had this big event where they helped raise money. It feels like they have moved on in some ways, have gotten donations in other places. Syracuse, on paper at the very least, had a successful run in the transfer portal where they were able to attain some pretty big talent, including Nate George, who led the ACC in assists last year. So while you could always use a guy that's got a few $1 million in his pocket ready to give it to Syracuse, in a way, has Syracuse moved on successfully from him? Because it feels like this relationship is about as far from salvageable as you can get right now.
I think Syracuse, especially over the last year, really the last 12 months or so, has moved on, and they're doing so much better in the NIL landscape now. They're Adrian Autry and his staff have been more proactive. The university more proactive. I think the NCAA's move to a revenue sharing plan is going to help schools like Syracuse. So there may not be exactly the need to have Adam Weitsman there as some sort of NIL savior. At the same time, could you use him? Absolutely. I mean, everybody could use another, boost here or there, whether it's $123,000 or whether it's $1 million. It would obviously help. I think the university is in a position of deciding whether the juice is worth the squeeze. That's a phrase that Chris and I have been tossing back and forth to each other over the last month or so as we've been working on this. It is the juice worth the squeeze. I think the answer from Syracuse up until now anyway has been, maybe not. And maybe that's part and parcel to them doing better in the NIL area now, that they are doing a lot more, and that Adrian Autry and his staff seem to be a lot better funded this time around in the transfer portal than they were a year ago. But still, it's like, do you really want to let that one potential booster go? It's kind of like it's another place where you could drill for money and not and maybe it's enough to get you a backup point guard. I don't know.
Especially if you know you have the oil well. It's one thing if you're looking for an oil well. It's quite another when you know there's one right there, but by everything we're talking about here and more, we can't even dip into that thing. You're not even searching for one here. Chris, let me turn to you on this. I'm always fascinated by these stories, and as somebody that still does occasionally go old school and watch a DVD, they've always got those cut scenes, right? And the things that maybe don't make the story. You guys had plenty of details in the story and so much that people will take away from it. But there's always a few interesting things that maybe for whatever reasons don't make the story. So what did you leave out? But maybe we can here in the podcast format let people know was something you found interesting in your reporting.
Yeah, I think there's two things that sort of jumped out to me. One was Adam would have really liked for us to use the fact that he was at the top of the CAF, the Cuse Athletics Fund donor. He was at the top level of that,
Gotcha.
Which season ticket holders know. If you pay money for your premium seats, that goes into your Cuse Athletics Fund points. Like Adam's spending on his seats alone put him at the top level of that. So, he would say, I'm not a major donor. I'm at the top level of your athletics donor ranking that your athletic department puts together. So that's an interesting claim that you're making. The other thing was a quote that Adam gave me, which was, ribbon cuttings are boring. And I just think it speaks to the disconnect between him and like an institution like Syracuse, right? Where there is no greater the honor than being invited to the ribbon cutting and taking out the gold helmets and the gold shovels and being there with the board of trustees. Like that is the ultimate, you helped out your school alma mater thing. And like, it is just not something that Adam values. And I think the school sort of felt the same way. Like, we don't value your celebrity guests. We don't really think that's helping us. And there's just a total disconnect in how both sides sort of see the world.
Let me toss this to both of you and you, whoever you guys could flip a coin or whatever to see to take it. But it made me think of this. Like, it feels like there's some resentment here. It feels like there's a little grinding of teeth. There could be, even in an era that changes on a minute by minute basis. There's some people that are traditional in their old school and like ribbon cuttings and like to do things the right way. Adam's not an alum. That might have rubbed some alums that have given money the wrong way.
He's not necessarily going to do everything for like the love of alma mater, right? And like that's the case for a lot of us. Like, he's going to do what he enjoys.
He's a businessman.
He enjoys watching
Syracuse. It helps him. Yeah.
He enjoys watching Syracuse basketball win. That's fun. Like, he also enjoys, bringing celebrities and being a social media influencer and that side of things, right? Like, there is a little bit of like sort of a purity test going on where it's like, well, Adam's intentions were not really to help the university, is what, Syracuse folks think. And I think Adam would argue, like, I was helping everybody. Like, I was helping Adam Weitsman. I was helping out the school. Like, what's the problem here?
Well, that's the thing, Mike. There's some things you can't put a value on here. What's the value? You always hear this during the NCAA tournament, like a George Mason makes a Final Four run. Like, you can't buy the advertising they're getting from this, and it's a fair point. So you can't.
Although actually you can,
I guess you can with how many, how much tuition goes up after that, right? But
applications. I've seen stories like how many.
That's a good point.
Like, applications go up.
But what's the valuation of Josh Allen sitting courtside? What's the valuation to, how cool is it the players think that they get to meet Giannis Antetokounmpo in the locker room afterwards and in all these things? And there just was a lot of, and you had it in the story. So Adam had the rights to SyracuseOrange.com, I believe it was, which was a website, and Adam made a big deal out of, I'm giving this back to you. And he valued it at $250,000. But Syracuse I feel like we're playing the prices right. They valued it at $1, right? So there's still, even in, I'm trying to help you. Both sides see things a lot differently. And ultimately, I think that's why we are here at this point of the story now with some more details, thanks to you guys, about why they just couldn't make this work. At the end of the day, so much of this just comes down to ego and image and pride. Where do we go from here? Is this salvageable? Is there still a chance? John Wildhack, Syracuse athletic director, has said Adam is still free to donate to Syracuse University. He's not banned from doing so. It feels like Adam has maybe left the door open to come back. You mentioned it earlier, Chris. He still was involved with Boeheim's Army this month. He still has a place in his heart, it would seem, for being involved with Syracuse basketball. Is this over, or is there, you're telling me there's a chance that this thing could be renewed in some way?
I mean, there are clearly hard feelings, right, on both sides that would need substantially to be resolved for Adam to sort of return to donating. You know, he said he would consider donating to a collective if those hard feelings were resolved. But it feels like there's just so much built up that it's hard to imagine sort of a positive resolution here. I don't know, Mike, maybe you feel differently, but it would take a lot of work from somebody.
It would take work. And right now it's kind of hard to see how it could happen from afar. I'm still kind of mystified that it came to this. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, why can't these two sides just get along, come to an agreement? We're going to have you do it this way. The landscape has changed. Some of the things that Syracuse was nervous about 2-3 years ago, they don't matter anymore. And some of the things that they needed Adam to do is the only way to do things anymore. What with other, legislation and stuff going on. Do you really want to have an Adam payment to an athlete have to go through the College Sports Commission for approval? Send it through a collective, whatever you got to do. But yeah, I don't know. It would seem like this is silly and that all sides should be, reasonable people should be able to come to an agreement. But right now, I think there's still some hurt feelings, pride, ego, whatever you want to call it, that I think some people still got to get past.
I think it can be salvaged because money talks, and you know what walks in this era, and egos and image and pride can be put aside for these things. I am intrigued by the fact that there was a photo that was included in your story that one Carmelo Anthony was hanging out with Adam just this past weekend in Skinny Atlas. His son is on the team next year. Melo has publicly stated he responded on social media when the discussion was hot and heavy. He brought up Atan Thomas, who previously had a show on a Twitch stream on Q Sports Talk, where he really went at this subject and interviewed Adam on his podcast, by the way, about this. And Melo said he's trying to repair this relationship. So Melo's still got a lot of influence at that university. And if he wants it to happen, then things could happen. It's a matter of battle of wills and egos and some of the bigger alums out there at Syracuse. I never shut the door on these things. Weirder things have happened. Yes, pride's in the way. Egos have been hurt. And Syracuse put out a pretty bold statement there saying he's not a major donor. But if he wants to be, I think they'll find a way to make it work. So I have no inside information on that. I live in a world where I know the influence of money. And if they really want to make this work, they'll find a way to make this work. The right people, though, have to give the green light for that to go forward. And we shall leave it at that, gentlemen.
Carmelo is the guy. I mean, Carmelo is like if there's one guy who might have the cachet and coolness to do the thing, it's probably Melo.
Stay tuned, as we like to say. In the meantime, incredible work. Thank you for the blood, sweat, and tears and research and interviewing and everything you put into this. It took something we were all wondering about forward in the way we needed to. We got some details and some numbers and some data we needed. And now people can make a judgment on their own. As Mike said best, it's a shame they couldn't work this out one way or the other. But now people can make, I think, a much more educated opinion on this, an analysis on this, thanks to the work that you gentlemen put on this. Thank you so much for doing that. And thanks, of course, for hanging on the pod today and describing it all.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, appreciate it, Brent.
Thanks to Mike and Chris for their exhaustive reporting on that story. Thanks to you for reading it, by the way. If you haven't, please check it out. A great job by Mike and Chris on this story. And look, I think it's a shame they couldn't work things out. This is one of those things where I get tugged in both directions. I can see the perspective from both. I could get why Syracuse would be like, look, maybe we can't do it this way, but can we do it that way, right? I think a lot of the fears that they had 2 years ago look silly, and nobody knew at the time. I'm not blaming Syracuse for having reservations about certain things, particularly a school that's been investigated twice in its basketball program in the early 90s and, of course, in 2015. But now that seems silly, and there are provisions put into place. Adam was seeking the opinion of national experts on NCAA rules. Now you have, through the direct payments, and you have to file it through Deloitte. It's, we think, somewhat regulated. I have my skepticism about that, right? But it would seem to me Adam would not have a problem funneling these payments through that. Even with the recent NIL executive order put out by President Trump, you still can pay an athlete and show that they are getting basically a legitimate sponsorship and do it that way. That's not going to curtail anything that's happening out there. If anything, Adam was ahead of the game. But I get in some ways why others would be skeptical. The great unknown is what he would have paid out had he continued to be associated with Syracuse, because what we now know is he was not paying anywhere near the money that maybe people thought he was at the time, but it's still kind of the great unknown. He pledged $1 million for certain players, but we never got to see that executed. As I said to Mike and Chris, it's amazing how these things at the highest levels still come down to ego, image, and pride. I get why Syracuse would want to be risk averse in some ways and want to do things the quote unquote right way, whatever that is in 2025. I also know if you got an oil well and you can tap into that thing and have somebody willing to do it, do that and ask for, what's that great expression? Ask for forgiveness, not permission. I think in this day and age, you got somebody willing to give you whatever those dollars would be if it did go up from what the documented numbers are from what Adam was giving Syracuse. I don't think Syracuse is in a position to push that away. But with that statement and with Syracuse making a pretty strong line in the sand here with Mr. Weitsman not being a major contributor to Syracuse University, which they were right about based on the documented numbers here, but also seemingly not making an effort to bury the hatchet and go forward here in an era when you have somebody that's willing to give you, at least he's stated publicly, willing to give you a lot of money. And it brought something to Syracuse that was as unique as it was in college sports. I think this relationship can be salvaged, and I think Carmelo Anthony may have a big role in that, but we'll have to stay tuned on that. Thanks for staying tuned to this podcast today, my friends. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your pods. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders have certainly been buzzing on this Adam Weitsman story since it came out on Monday. We've got a couple of great things lined up for you here on the pod. You see it over my shoulder if you're watching on YouTube. The author of The American Game, the best thing I've ever read about the sport of lacrosse, S.L. Price, is going to join us on the pod. We are going to have training camp updates for you. Syracuse football training camp starts this week. It is football season, friends, so get ready for that. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders will get exclusive tidbits from Syracuse football training camp. So we are back at it, friends. We had a little summer break, but off we go. And before you know it, we're just about a month away from Syracuse, Tennessee, opening the college football season in Atlanta. So much to come here on the pod, and our Syracuse Sports Insiders will be kept abreast of all of it, and they'll get it first. And in some cases, they'll get it exclusively. All right. Thanks to Mike and Chris. Thanks to you, and thanks to our friend Just Joe. As we noted earlier in the pod, we love to highlight your original music here on Syracuse Sports. All the info is in the show notes on how you could be a part of this podcast with your original music. Just Joe is going to take us out with his version of the song Kryptonite. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will catch you next time here on Syracuse Sports.
I took a walk around the world to ease my troubled mind. I left my body lying somewhere in the sands of time. I watched the world flow to the dark side of the moon. I feel there's nothing I can do. Yeah. I watched the world flow to the dark side of the moon. After all, I knew it had to be something to do with you. I really don't mind what happens now and then, as long as you'll be my friend at the end. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I'll keep you by my side with my superhuman might. Kryptonite. You call me strong, you call me weak, but your secrets I will keep. You took for granted all the times I never let you down. You stumbled in and bumped your head. If not for me, then you'd be dead. I picked you up, put you back on solid ground. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I'll keep you by my side with my superhuman mind. Kryptonite, yeah. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I'll keep you by my side with my superhuman mind. Kryptonite, yeah. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and where will you